Hey guys, today I'm going to do a reading from Daniel chapter 3, and this is about the story of when Nebuchadnezzar threw Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the fire for not bowing down to false gods. And so we're going to start down at verse 13, and it says, "Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?'" And I'm going to stop there for a minute. This world oftentimes expects us to bow down to false gods in all kinds of ways. These days it might not look like, it might not look like statues, but, ideas and false beliefs, anything that goes against the Word of God. And we can see that some things haven't changed. So, Jesus said in this world we would have troubles, and that people would hate us because of him. The more loyal we are to Jesus, the more the world is going to hate us. So the more we stand up for what's right, sometimes the more we pay for it. We can see that from this story that, God didn't keep them from going in the fire. He let them go in, but he did something real good with it. And we're going to see that in a second here. So, but the first point I wanted to make out is that, we can expect the world to hate us, and we can expect to be punished for doing the right thing. But with real Christianity, we're called to walk through that fire. If God sees fit to have us go through it, we are called to it. There's nothing easy about the Christian walk, and we're gonna see that here. But we're gonna see God's glory really shine through this. So let's see. So he asked, "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Then he's about to get an answer on that one. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand." So on one hand, they're showing great faith by saying, we're going to walk into that furnace and our God will deliver us. But then a greater measure of faith is them saying, and it might sound like doubt at first, because they say, but even if he doesn't deliver us, but I think that just shows just how strong their faith is, because they're saying, even if he doesn't deliver us, we're still all in. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. One side note I wanted to point out is that even though they're refusing the authority of this king, because they're first submitting to their king, Jesus, right? They're still keeping it respectful. So they're declining to worship him. So they're taking a stand. But Paul mentioned that, we are to obey and follow all authority on earth, not to the point of disobeying God, though. God comes first, but we do still respect the authority that he's given to rulers, however unfair they may be in this world. But so I just wanted to point out that they still address him as your majesty. They give him a clear no. They won't obey. They won't bow down to any false gods. But they do it in a matter that doesn't kill their witness in the meantime. All right, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of God, or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So the furnace was already hot, and he turned it up 7 times. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. So they heated that furnace up so hot that the people that were throwing them in died just by getting close to it. Sometimes God will let the fire get turned up real hot in your life just because he wants to show the enemy what it will do to them and what it can't do to you. Then Nebuchadnezzar, this is awesome. Then Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire. 4 men, not 3. And they're unbound and they're unharmed. So this fire just killed, they turned it up 7 times hotter, right? It just killed the guys that threw them in. And now not only are they walking around, but there's somebody else in there with them. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God. Now he's addressing the Most High God. He's not putting God, down to be, playing him down to be some little God compared to his gods now. He's calling him the Most High God. And he says, come out. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Sometimes God will let you go through the fire so other people can see that you come out not burned. They came out not smelling like smoke. Their clothes were still intact. Their hair was still good. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. So we can see here that when we're willing to lay down our lives and carry our cross and do whatever comes our way, sometimes that's the very thing that will turn an unbeliever from the fire that they're about to walk in, right? So there was probably nothing else in Nebuchadnezzar's life that was going to get him to see that their God was the Most High God, other than seeing the impossible. So sometimes God will ask you to walk through fire that while it may not seem fair to you and it may not be something you can understand at the time, sometimes the people that are causing you pain in your life are the ones that he's trying to get to through you. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, he went from not believing in their God to calling him the Most High God. Sometimes God will let somebody with influence in your life persecute you, not only for them. So we see that he believed after this, but he also had influence over the land and commanded people to worship the one true God. So a couple things I wanted to point out was that, the same fire that killed the wicked was the same fire. That was the same fire that unbound them. They went in tied up. Their hands were tied. They were bound. And it was the fire that was supposed to kill them that set them free. So another thing that God wanted me to point out is that sometimes when you go through the fire, that's the very thing that's going to make you more Christ-like. He's going to use it as a refining fire. They used it. It's like Genesis 50:20 when Joseph said, "You meant it for evil, but God intended it for good." The enemy tried to burn them up, but God used it to refine them, while at the same time using it to make other believers out of it. God could have cut those ropes. He could have made those ropes just fall off of their hands, but and we see in other stories where God delivers people in different ways, but in this time, He wanted to show, the people around Him that, whether it be fire of this world, trials, oppression, or hellfire itself, nothing can touch God's people. Not if He doesn't allow it. It can only go so far. The weapon will be formed, but it won't prosper against God's purposes. And another thing I wanted to point out is that the Bible says that many are the afflictions of the righteous, but God delivers them from all. We see that they were afflicted, but they were delivered. And God doesn't promise He doesn't promise us an easy life, but He does promise that the weapon that's formed won't prosper. So I hope this helped you guys. And if you're going through the fire, whatever it may be, just know that God always has His purposes in it. And sometimes, it's hot. It gets turned up 7 times hotter than we'd like it to be, but God always has His purposes. So, I would just pray on it and ask God to show you what those purposes are for whatever trials you're going through. And ask Him to give you a heart like James, when James says, to consider it pure joy. It doesn't mean we have to enjoy the pain, but we can still look at it with an attitude of, seeing that there's a greater purpose in it, and have our faith strengthened through it. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.